Hi, hello, and welcome, or welcome back, I suppose. Fun fact about me: if you haven't heard me say so before, I am, in fact, a trans man. Ooh, scary. But if you have never heard me say so, it is potentially still not that shocking in all fairness. But being a trans man and loving a little bit of sketch comedy, it was only a matter of time before I would eventually find my way to Lewis Hancock's socials and stuff. I first found his stuff through his typical British mum sketches and stayed for all the big moods about teen years and trans stuff and all that kind of thing. And also his very typical British mum, who is, as one may expect, remarkably similar to my own. And while I know by the time I'm getting to this book, he's already released a sequel, I've been meaning to get onto it since finding out it existed, and yet I never have. However, not too long ago, I found it in my library, and I've been on a load of graphic novels lately, so it only feels fitting that I finally read Welcome to St. Hell, My Trans Teen Misadventure by Lewis Hancock's. One of the first things that I noticed is that he writes as he speaks. He's a northerner, and that comes through in the way that he talks in the text. I was somewhat apprehensive about it, if I'm honest, but that's just because I've had one too many bad experiences with people trying to write certain kinds of dialect in a phonetic kind of way, and it rarely seems to work. I had some hope though, because it is the way he speaks, so it was more likely to come off as more natural, and to my relief it absolutely worked, and I did stop noticing it for the most part after first spotting it at the start. And honestly, that's the ideal way of writing like this. You only notice it after the first instance if it's a really specific dialectic word or phrase coming up that maybe either you're super familiar with, or what the fuck does this mean, or b an incredibly poor attempt at writing an accent or dialect, but it flowed really well here and it felt natural. I think my favourite thing about this book is how frank it is about everything, really. It's all laid bare before you, the good, the bad and the ugly. This feels like a proper telling of teen years, because it feels cringe in exactly the right way. It doesn't feel like it's trying too hard to be cool, but it doesn't feel so try hard in the other direction, where it's just like, there are certain kinds of cringe humour where it's just like, it's trying too hard to show you that your lead is edgy and different. And while this is a biopic, like this is biographical, there is still often an effort to elevate in one way or the other. But not so here, Yeah, the teen years are such a time of literally every single little thing about you, about your friends, your family, your schoolwork, all of it feeling huge. And everyone's going through it, but it is genuinely so difficult to articulate until it's over and you can look back and feel sorry for little you. And there's that urge to either fit in or stand out, but standing out can be insufferable because you don't necessarily actually want to stand out, you want to just step away from the norm. But in doing so, you automatically make yourself a target, but at the same time, well, if you're already a target, a nightmare. And on top of that, you're then questioning your gender or your sexuality. It is a nightmare. Trust me, I've been there. And I will come back to the frankness in literally just a second, but truly there is something so comforting in seeing the timeline of his transition, for me in particular, because it is so similar to mine. Two proud members of the emo to trans mask pipeline, but I'm not meant to be talking about that right now. I'm sure I will come back to it later, but you all know, these reviews, you know how they work. Don't expect it to be as linear as any of us would like, unless it's a long form deep dive, and that's not what this is. So back to talking about the openness of everything here and it being deeply necessary. Now, This isn't the easiest topic to talk about, but Lewis does talk about his experience with disordered eating and a poor relationship with exercise, and the two obviously being linked there. I know a lot of trans people, no matter which way they're going, who are affected by the type of thinking he describes here. That rapid and severe weight change will not help you pass better and will only serve to cause health issues across the spectrum, both physically and mentally. When I was at uni, I had a lot of similar thinking to Teen Lewis here. Losing weight might make me actually look like a man better than carrying weight on me in awkward places, but I'm sorry to anybody listening to this who still thinks like that or is in those early stages. And you know, maybe I do find a young trans person thinking the same way. Maybe I can add more weight to my hips, I can lose weight off my hips, this, that and the other. It doesn't work. And to young me, it didn't work. And actually, you're chubbier now and you still have hips. It happens, and you'll learn to not really care about it. And I think that's the ultimate way to gain a healthy relationship with your body, is that, for me at least, it's not about like finding ways to love yourself. It's about finding ways of just being like, my physical appearance is just there. If my physical appearance is linked to a health issue, say I've got a weird lump, or I become so obese that it does cause me issues, then I'll deal with it. But as it is, I'm like kind of chubby. Okay, it is what it is. And thinking like that is insane if I look back at the way I was from a horrendously young age. But I will not be serious from now on, because this book is not always serious. Well, I think I will get a little bit serious sometimes. But anyway, there is a lot of regular teen cringe here, unrelated to the gender stuff. Like when he thought he was going to have his first kiss, but he wasn't sober and threw up on the person he was with. Oh, proper like in-betweeners type moment. I have to be honest, I would have run away and nobody would ever have seen me again. That is just, oh my god. And I think the frank openness, both in the light-hearted and the more sort of deep ways, it works twofold, depending on the reader. For someone like me, on the other side of the awkward pre- and early stages of transition, the sense of comfort in shared experience warms my heart. There's that feeling of, well, at least it wasn't just me. But for the target audience of teens, and on the back it does say 14 plus, so I would assume that teenagers are the target demographic, the comfort of knowing it gets better, things will make sense, and that it will not always feel so overwhelming brings me so much joy at the thought that someone will be able to find what many of us never had and wish we could have had. There's a section about him doing some online research in the early days. I think he's just come out, or he's just about to, and he's finding YouTubers talking about transitioning, and that's what I also had. Shout out Jamie Dodger. If you're a trans man my age, you have seen that transition timeline, and God knows I have found oodles of comfort in my countless watches over the years. Young, especially pre-tea autumn, really just went, I'm holding this in my hand and hoping for the best. Sorry you still don't have a beard, but we're working on it. There's a tiny bit more than there was this time last year. Not much, but a little bit. So maybe this time next year, we'll have a tiny bit more. Who knows? And Lewis might be a few years older than me. I think 5 to 10 years. I didn't do the maths looking at the years that he put in there. I think closer to 10 years older than me. But that experience of having to look to find people online is a shared one that I have with him, and I cannot help but feel that there will be little eggs out there getting cracked finding this book, and I love that for each and every one of them. I'm not sure if that's just a trans femme word, but I've never heard anybody use an alternative for trans men, so I think that's just a trans word in general for the yet to figure out who they are. People don't have to search in the same way anymore, and that makes me so happy. Like, I appreciate reading this, seeing things like the way he talks about that pre-coming out denial, because I find it to be such a common trait to see that the closer we get to coming out, myself included, the more we go, oh, I'm not trans. Like in my case, I'm like, no, I'm definitely a woman. I work so hard on appearing like our assigned gender at birth, and it almost always looks like someone in drag. At least in hindsight, you look back and go, you tried. And I think like the drag aspect probably is a little bit more so for trans guys, just because it's a lot easier to blend in with regular man look than like if you try hard to look like a woman when that's very clearly not what you are. And I'm not talking about transvestigation weirdos here. I'm literally just talking about, it's like, I'm literally not a woman and I'm doing my best, but I don't know how to do it because I'm not a woman. It just looks like drag. But like I said, a lot of that is in hindsight. Like in the moment, I'm like, yeah, I look so good, so woman. And then I'm looking back and it's like, you look like a man in a wig. And sure, there is a level of knowing you're denying the truth at the time, but looking back, it's just like, oh, little buddy, you are trying to fool yourself even more so than everybody else. And Lewis tackles that so damn well. Reading about his younger self had me feeling like I was reading about my own. And there was just, like I said, so much comfort in that. And if I can see as an adult, past all that, being like, man, that feels like you're talking to younger me when he's doing all of that. Like, I'm you from the future, I'm talking to my younger self. There is going to be people, there are going to be people out there who are going to have the experience. They are younger, they're earlier in their transition, they've not been able to come out yet, or they're still figuring it out, that are going to have something finally click in reading this, because they have that sense of, you know what, maybe it isn't going to be so bad. And yes, I am well aware that there are other circumstances that mean you can't come out, but coming out and knowing that you're trans yourself are two wholly different experiences, and denying it to other people is, again, wholly different experience to denying it to yourself. And accepting who you are for yourself is always going to be the first hurdle, and stuff like this is what helps. Knowing that there's a future is what helps. And the retrospective also works so well outside of the identity stuff as well. There's a moment where he's, being a moody little teen, he storms out of the house to meet his mates. His mum, separated from his dad at this point, is eating her tea alone in front of the TV, and it's just like, when we are teenagers, we'll never truly see things from our parents' eyes in the way that we can do as we get older. The separation and having to be a single mum is hard on her, and it's clear that now Lewis can see she was just scared about him. Being out late with God knows who and being in the house by herself was lonely. But seeing him wasn't seeing that. He had all his own stuff going on, and that made it hard to see the truth, which is pretty normal if we're honest. Even though there's not a huge amount of detail in his illustration, when you look at this panel here, the one that I was talking about there, where she sat in front of the TV eating her dinner, you can see so much. It still manages to be incredibly emotive. And I do think I'll be reading the latest part of the series. I don't know if it's just going to be 2 parts or if he's going to do more. But like I said, there was a huge amount of comfort to be found in the pages of this one, and I hope to do that again as I read more. This really warmed my heart in so many ways. Most of my notes were not necessarily actually commenting on the book. I was just commenting about how I had so many shared experiences, and that just, there are people out there who need this. And turns out I think I did as well, because there are points where I would love to write something like this, even just for myself. The idea of talking to one's younger self and explaining things, in this case, it just warms me. It warms me in a very particular way. But be it fiction or non-fiction, let me know about some of your comforting trans and queer books, because I love it when I get to feel all warm and fuzzy inside, especially in regards to those topics. Feel free to like, feel free to subscribe, and feel free to ring that notification bell, all that cringe shit I'm supposed to ask you to do in my videos. But most importantly, I hope you have a wonderful day, a wonderful night, a wonderful whenever you are watching this. Take good care of yourself. Right.